Welcome back to Easily Entertained. My name is Bryson Olson, and here we talk about all the good things about entertainment. And today we are talking about Knives Out, which in a few weeks will actually have its 5-year anniversary, which I think is pretty exciting. It's an amazing modern mystery, as I'm sure you know, because who doesn't already love this movie? I know I do. So we're going to talk about all the bits that I love, and maybe you love too, or maybe you learned something that you didn't know before, or spark some of your own thoughts, you know? Who knows? Let's get started. So Knives Out is a much more modern take on the classic whodunit type story. Think Clue, where a murder or death happens, it's a mystery, something goes awry, and the audience, along with the story's characters, have to try and figure out who was it that did it. In most stories, that is the mystery. Nobody knows who the killer actually is, so you have to go throughout the story trying to piece it together. You get little bits of clues, maybe a murder weapon, maybe some motives. Well, in this one, of course, everyone has motives for killing the main guy, Harlan Thrombey, because they all want his inheritance. So you kind of got to go through, you learn all their stories, you try and piece together all the clues and learn about what they were doing the night of the murder. You know, typical mystery type story. Turns out most of them have at least fairly decent alibis, or so they say, of course. But as we are learning all the little details, we do find out one big detail. It looks like Harlan's personal nurse, Marta Cabrera, was the one who actually caused his death. Accidentally, mind you. When everyone is being interviewed by Benoit Blanc, played by Daniel Craig, fantastically I gotta say, to try and get the stories of everyone during the night of Harlan's death, we see a flashback from Marta after she's being interviewed, and you see that she accidentally switched up the medicine for Harlan. She usually gives him, I don't remember the name of the drug, but she gives him his medicine and sometimes a little bit of morphine. She gets them switched up. So the medicine dose is actually now the morphine dose. So she gives him way too much morphine, thus resulting supposedly in his death, or killing himself before it takes him so that it looks like a suicide. The story then takes a little bit of a turn. You already know who did it now. So how do we go from here? Well, something does seem a little bit off, but you do have a culprit, Miss Sweet Cabrera, and you are just kind of hoping that she can get away with it. Not because, you know, you want a murderer to get away with it, but because she's such a sweet person. Instead of like trying to find the killer, you're like, oh, she did this so accidentally. We don't want her to actually get in trouble for it. So instead, it's the characters who are trying to find out, and you are mostly just hoping that Marta can make it out. And she also has this thing where she throws up if she lies, so that kind of plays along with it a little bit, as well as she kind of has to help Benoit Blanc because he knows that she can't lie, so automatically assumes he can trust her because she was Harlan's most trusted. So she kind of has to say some like half-truths or lie by omission so that she can get away with things. And I think that's a pretty clever take on the traditional whodunit type story and archetype. Marta doesn't really seem like a bad person, so you don't really want her to get caught. It was an accident. Hopefully she gets away so that, you know, she can still have a good life. So every question or step further to the truth kind of just makes the stakes rise, as every moment you could accidentally break Marta's cover. And that's crazy. And I love that aspect of Knives Out.
It's my company.
Right. Sorry.
I built my business from the ground.
So now let's veer the story just a little bit. Don't worry, we will come back to it. But first, I do want to talk about all the characters in this movie. In any whodunit story, you gotta have some good characters that fit the mystery, and usually they're a bit quirky and sometimes a little bit obvious in their standing. I feel like movies like Death on the Nile on the Nile, Murder on the Orient Express, Haunting in Venice. Like, they're kind of a bit obvious in their characters. In this one, the obviousness, I feel like, is mostly taken away, which I think is good. But the quirkiness of all the characters is definitely still there. Of course, we have, like our detective Benoit Blanc, who's got this over-the-top southern drawl about him, and is clearly very smart and a good judge of character, but is just a little bit extra in who he is. So I love that. Aside from Marta, this personality also gets to be the focus of the movie, just because he chews up the scene anytime he's on screen. And I think the duality of his character and Marta just kind of play really well to each other, because he's a lot more outspoken, flamboyant, whereas Marta is a bit more quiet and reserved. But the other characters as well, I think, also get some great time. You have Richard and Linda, who are the daughter and son-in-law to Harlan. Richard kind of cracks me up in virtually every scene he is in, just because he's walking on eggshells, because you find out earlier Harlan found out that Richard was cheating, so he doesn't want Linda to find out, because then he could lose some money from being in the family. He doesn't really want to do that. He wants to stay rich, obviously. And then you also have Linda, who's played by Jamie Lee Curtis. So obviously she is fantastic in this movie, because it's Jamie Lee Curtis. You literally can't go wrong casting her in anything. She's always amazing. You also got Joni, who is played by the thriller icon Toni Collette, and she is really, in this movie, she's kind of like this Weasley type character. She was married to one of Harlan's sons before that son had died, and has kind of stayed connected to the family mainly for like financial support, specifically to get her daughter Meg through college. But she's also kind of been stealing some money, double dipping a little bit, and she's trying to use her daughter as an excuse for all that, but she's just a little weasel, getting a little too far gone, and I kind of like it. I find it very intriguing. And you also got Walt and his wife Donna. Donna is, I'm not going to necessarily say dumb, but she is kind of, I don't know, maybe ditzy in a way. Like, I kind of like it. She's not a significant part of the family, so you don't really hear a lot from her. She just chimes in every now and then, like it's usually a quick comment, but I kind of like that, because we already have a lot of characters, so we can't flesh them all out. So some just one-dimensional characters are not too bad, but Walt is pretty important. He runs the publishing for his dad's books. So which, by the way, sorry I didn't say this at the beginning, Harlan Thrombey was like a mystery writer in this universe, and so that's kind of who we're following. This mystery writer dies, it's his own mystery. Crazy. But anyways, Walt was kind of handling all the publishing for the books, and he was getting fired, so he kind of has some motive for everything. And there was a lot of stake when Harlan died, and I like that they add all the motives for all these characters. I think that's great, and they all have their own personalities as well. All of them are after Harlan's money, his publishing empire, but like they're all related to him in some form or fashion. And it's not that they necessarily hated him with all their guts, but they had some good reason for him to die, and being that he was so old, it was a decent cover if they did want to do anything, so you could kind of sneak it in a little bit. But for some reason, everybody that was majorly involved does seem to have an alibi, and for some reason the only one that has seemingly nothing to gain, Marta Cabrera, how was it her? Something seems off here. I don't think that makes any sense. Definitely something fishy is going on here.
Matter of fact, eat shit. How's that? Eat shit.
About maybe halfway through the movie, we get introduced to a new character. We didn't see him at the beginning, but we did hear his name. Linda and Richard's son, Ransom, Harlan's grandson. They were kind of alike. They were almost pupils in a way, like Ransom was kind of Harlan's pupil in a way, and they were very much alike and would butt heads sometimes, but for the most part they were, kind of locked in. It seems like, as they've explained, like the family has explained. So he comes back, and like the reason he's here halfway through the movie is it's the reading of Harlan's will. So that's when he comes back. But he wasn't at Harlan's funeral. Already a little bit weird. And to all the characters, it also seems a little bit off. It seems like because of all this investigation going on and him not being at the funeral, and he just shows up for the will. Sounds like we got suspect number 1 out here. And, he wasn't there the night of Harlan's death. Or, well, he was, but they could hear Ransom arguing with Harlan. So clearly something was going down. He very possibly had something to do with it. And spoilers, because it's been out for 5 years, so sorry about that. Yeah, no shit. Ransom had something to do with it. Duh. Like, could you have a more obvious character? Like, sorry, that sounds a little bit harsh, because in the actual story, maybe it's sort of obvious, but not that obvious, because he is a little bit fishy, but you're not entirely thinking that it's him that killed Harlan, because we've already seen Marta's flashback, so it's clearly her, right? Ransom's innocent, even if he is a little scummy or something. And it isn't until we get further into the story that we realize that it was actually him. It's a good bait and switch type beat that I think works for this movie quite well. And that part I don't really mind. I think that is done well. That I'm not saying is the obvious part of his character. But the reasons that I think Ransom is so obviously behind everything is as follows. There, I think, are 3 big ones. 1, obviously not being present for the first half of the movie, and then when he comes in, he's suddenly very key to the plot. Yeah, his presence is going to be a little bit more felt. That is red flag number 1. 2, just going along with Marta after she tells him the story of how she accidentally switched up the things and essentially was the cause of Harlan to kill himself. He just goes along with it despite being able to go to the police and get the will reverted so that he can get his own inheritance. Red flag number 2. Though he does kind of determine, like, oh, I'll get more of the inheritance if I just split it half and half with Marta rather than trying with all of his aunts and uncles and parents, of course. But the third and final reason that this is so obvious is that his name is literally Ransom. The thing that in every mystery where the antagonist tries to take something or extort something for money or something like that. They want to exchange one thing for money. The ransom. He is literally wanting to exchange blackmail for knowing that Marta did it to get some of Harlan's inheritance. Duh. It's his most obvious aspect. It's literally his name. Yes, it's not just thrown out, oh, give me money or I will expose you to everybody else. He doesn't just do that. It's just a lot more subtle than that. But obviously, it's so obvious because his name is Ransom. And maybe someone has pointed out this stuff before, which, valid. It was sitting right in front of us, so I'm sure that is very possible. But that is what I love about this movie, is that it is just sitting right in front of us. There are a lot of things that the movie just actively shows us. It's not trying to hide a bunch of things and then act smart later. I like that they, for the most part, they show us everything, granted, usually from a specific character's perspective, so it's out of context sometimes, but they do show us everything. And then it's not till the very end where we finally get all the connections, and it makes a lot of sense. And like for this, like for the name, rewatching it, I made that connection myself. Sometimes you just have to take a few rewatchings to actually realize something, because I was like, oh wait, wait a second, Ransom has to be a very intentional name choice to actually hint at who the real killer is. How did I miss it before? It just makes so much sense. Plus, Chris Evans does such a great job playing this guy. Fantastic. Also, I really want a sweater. But like, we've usually seen Chris in that like hero protagonist type role, and like he's pretty good in that. But to see him in this where he's just like a conniving little shithead is just great. I love it. He just plays the villain so well. And some actors can just do both. And I really liked it. I feel like another one that's like that is like James McAvoy. I feel like he does really good at doing both. But Chris Evans, I feel like giving him these more like subtle villain type roles, I think it just works out so well. And I just love how Knives Out is able to just tell such a fun whodunit type story while just doing its own thing like this and not making it super over the top. Like they have a character who's over the top, but you know, some of the characters in general are just over the top. That's kind of a staple of the trope, but it's not as present in this one as in other movies of the medium. And I like that it makes the mystery genre its own, and I just think it's great. And I think that's why everybody loves it. So speaking of loving it, we got to talk about our rating. If you don't know the Easily Entertained rating scale, it goes as follows. From least to best, it is garbage, once is fine, right mood, quotable, go to, and all day, every day. And I'm going to put Knives Out. It's not really going to be a shocker to anybody because Knives Out is just, it's that good. It's an all day, every day type movie. I can always pick out another little bit that I like when I'm watching Knives Out. I never don't have a good time. I had to have that double negative right there. It's always so much fun to be watching Knives Out. The characters are fun. The mystery's cool. Even if you know the end of the movie already, it's just, it's fun. I think it's great. So if you have a different rating, please let us know down in the comments below. And that is it for this episode of Easily Entertained. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe so that you can be notified of all new episodes as they come out every Tuesday. It's always a great time. And if you have any suggestions for shows or movies you'd like to see me talk about in the future, please leave a comment down below. But until next time, bye!